Welcome to the Debt Matters podcast, where we help Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay, and in today's show, we're going to talk about business bankruptcy in Canada. Now, how does that actually work? And what are the different types of business structures in our country? That will make a difference to your business bankruptcy. If your business does go into bankruptcy, will it affect you personally? How do you go about putting your business into bankruptcy? And will your employees still get paid if you declare bankruptcy for your business? To walk us through this and more, Derek Chase is joining me from Derek Chase & Associates, licensed insolvency trustee serving Vancouver Island, Sunshine Coast, and the North Coast of BC. Derek, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today's a great big topic, business bankruptcy in Canada. When it comes to these bankruptcies, do you find that a lot of people think of Canadian bankruptcies similar to American bankruptcies? Are they different?
They're definitely different in the terminology and the way they unfold, but at the end of the day, they are similar in that the business's assets are typically going out to the creditors. So in that way, it's similar, but the terminology, we often hear reference to Chapter 11 or Chapter 7 or this chapter business, and that simply just doesn't exist in Canada. It's not part of the process.
So if you hear business bankruptcy in Canada, that means things are rolling to stop the creditors, whereas in America, they have that Chapter 11 where they can then just restructure things, I guess.
Well, there's still lots of ways to restructure in Canada as well. It's just that the labels or the terminology is different. And I think probably a good place to go here at this time is just talk about how business is done in Canada, because there's different business structures, and that determines a lot how the bankruptcy filing is made. So for example, a self-employed person, that person is really much acting as an individual unless they're incorporated or have a limited company. And if they don't have a incorporated or limited company, their results for their business are going straight onto their personal income tax return, but it can still be classified as a business bankruptcy. And that's a little bit different than when you get into a setting where you have a company, and now that company is like a separate legal entity. It's got its own tax return. It can own its own property. It enters into leases. So that's a different setting. And that's sometimes hard for people to get their head around. They change those terms back and forth, but it's definitely makes a difference as to what sort of filing is available to you.
Can we actually back it up even more than that? And how does business bankruptcy in Canada actually work?
Well, if you're self-employed as an individual, business bankruptcy works very much along the lines of personal bankruptcy, in that the individual is making the bankruptcy filing. Now, in a corporate setting where you have a company that's incorporated or a limited company, the directors of that company are assigning the company into bankruptcy. And the trustee will come in and take control of the assets of the business and sell it or continue to operate it or wind it down. In both events, the creditors are getting notice of the bankruptcy. The creditors are getting access to assets that are free and clear. So it's, form versus substance here. It's just a bit of a confusing point as to how the business is actually operating, whether it's a self-employed individual or whether it's a corporation. It does make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And if it's a corporation, it does not affect the owner, or does it?
That's what a lot of people think, and we should spend a couple minutes on that because creditors are smart. They've been around the block more than once.
Okay.
And they've been stung and had their bad debt. So what most creditors will do is, even if they're dealing with a corporation and that's where the account is set up, they will get a personal guarantee on that account as well. And that personal guarantee is typically signed by either the president or a director or someone that's involved in that company. So even if the company all of a sudden just stopped and there were no assets to recover, that creditor can then look at their paperwork and say, aha, I've got the president here as a personal guarantor. I'm going to go collect from them now. So they dance around that corporate structure to be able to still collect.
What about if you're like the solopreneur then and your business goes into bankruptcy? It does, I guess it would affect you personally the same way an individual would declare bankruptcy? Or how does that work?
Well, if you're the owner of a business that's doing business through a company, the company discontinues or goes into bankruptcy, then the creditors potentially come after you personally.
Right.
Then you have those same choices that any individual would have to be able to do either a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy filing to get relief from the debt that's following you. So it's kind of a two-stage decision-making process. You look at the business, you say, is this business worth saving? Should this business do a proposal or should it just close or should it be assigned into bankruptcy? If the answer is to close it or put it into bankruptcy, then the second stage decision is, what does that mean for me personally? Am I going to have too much debt coming at me personally because I've guaranteed all these things? In regards to the corporation, if it had lots of income tax debt, that type of debt doesn't need to be guaranteed. If the income tax department wants to raise an assessment against a director, being the president or vice president or something like that, they can just do it. And then all of a sudden that shows up on your personal notice of assessment. So that two-stage process of decision-making is one that we like to step through, though, to firstly decide, what's going to happen to this company or business.
Right. Now, what about when it comes to restructuring? You mentioned, can this company be saved or not be saved? Is that something that you get involved with when somebody comes to you and says, okay, my business is in trouble?
Yeah, that's a hard one to generalize because there's so many different types of businesses. A lot of times we see businesses where they're really quite small businesses. It could be just an individual who has incorporated a company and they're flowing sort of their regular work as a drywaller or a faller in the logging industry, and that money is just flowing through that company very quickly. There's no assets in the company to speak of, and the money's taken out as soon as it goes into the company. That's quite in contrast to a company that's got stores all across Canada,
right?
Or a company that's got all sorts of equipment and employees. The Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act applies equally to both those settings, but they're drastically different situations. So if you have that setting where it's a national company, there's a lot more restructuring in the sense of getting different lenders involved, and in that setting, there's usually big lenders, and you could end up with what's called a receivership, which is when the lender takes control because they've got a general security agreement.
Now, you actually mentioned the term employees. If you go into bankruptcy, a business goes into a bankruptcy, do the employees still get paid?
Oh, well, it's been quite a controversial point over the last number of years, and the government has brought in a program to help employees get paid in those settings. It's called the Wage Earners Protection Act, and it will take a backward-looking lens as to how much the employees can get paid. And employees would have to file evidence of their time and file a claim with the trustee, but there is a process in larger settings, larger business bankruptcies mainly, where employees can get some pay that they were owed. And if you're an employee of a big company that has recently discontinued and is in bankruptcy or receivership, all I would say there is, get in touch with the trustee, inquire about this wage earner protection plan, and file your claim. Because if you don't file that claim, you're not going to see any money.
Wow. And knowing how tough it is for so many Canadians right now, if you were actually working for somebody and this happened and you missed out on, some of that money, that could be quite detrimental to a family.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's money that's owed to you, and you should get it. So, but you do have to take some action. It's not going to just automatically come to you. You have to be in touch with the trustee and file.
Yeah. We've got some time here. Can you explain to me how somebody puts their business into bankruptcy? What are the steps?
Well, again, it's two different settings, really. If it's self-employed as an individual, the steps are very much like any personal bankruptcy. It's you're in touch with the trustee, you provide the trustee with the information, and then the trustee prepares the documents, and the individual would sign them, and that's when the protection starts. For a business that's a corporation, you do have to get the permission of the directors to assign the company into bankruptcy. And that's a setting where if you have a smaller corporate entity that's closely controlled, it can be pretty easily done. But if it's a bigger company, there's more things to consider. But at the end of the day, with the corporation, the director is given permission to assign it into bankruptcy, and then the company is providing the trustee office with the information as to what are the assets, what are the debts, the pertinent information in order to prepare the forms. The forms are then drafted up, and the authorized director will sign it into bankruptcy.
Does the too big to fail saying ever hold true to maybe the bigger corporations that might be in financial trouble?
Yeah, I think so. I think for the national outfits that have lots of assets, you typically see some sort of restructuring where they come out of it still operating.
Mm-hmm.
In our office, we're not involved in any national filings, so I can't speak to that through experience. But you do see that where a company will be in some type of insolvency setting, and it'll still continue to operate, and it'll still continue to function on the other side of the insolvency filing. Mm-hmm. There's another term in Canada when you have a company that has more than $5 million of debt. That's called the Company Creditors Arrangement Act. So there are different ways for a corporation to restructure its debt, or do a corporate proposal. Another one's called a Division 1 proposal. So there are ways for some of these big operating companies to do that. And lots of times that's has a lot of attention from insolvency lawyers, and it's a national setting. So, but it happens.
Mm-hmm. And when you say a corporate proposal, is that the same as a consumer proposal for myself or any individual?
It's the same concept.
Yeah.
Where you're making an offer to the creditors. There are a number of differences in the structure of that. Probably the main one is if Division 1 proposal is voted down, there's a deemed bankruptcy filing right away. Mm-hmm. There's no choice as to what happens next. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a consumer proposal, there's more choices.
Gotcha. I love watching some different business shows where they have a business person go in and they start looking at the books and they realize how upside down a company is, and then they look at restructuring and they make this thing successful. Do you find that there is hope for businesses who are having a tough time? Maybe it's that solopreneur who's listening, that they just need some accounting help?
Yeah, it could be. It could be a setting where part of a person's business is unprofitable and another part is highly profitable. And you just need a sort of a fresh set of eyes to point that out, and you get rid of the unprofitable side of things and turn it around. So it's never a bad idea to have another set of eyes take a look at a situation and provide some ideas or thoughts about ways to move on to greener pastures, for sure.
Okay, good. So there is hope for us, is what you're saying.
There's always hope for us, Wayne.
I think a lot of people get a little stressed out thinking, what if I can't turn this around? What am I going to do? And just the whole emotional feeling of the business, because oftentimes that is their child. I mean, they created this. It's got to be so tough to let it go.
Yeah, I don't think you can say that loud enough, because for the self-employed person, that's just living it every waking moment sort of thing, and thinking about it before they go to bed and when they wake up, and they put so much effort and sweat and time into building this business, and then all of a sudden you get COVID, or all of a sudden you get some other macroeconomic event that could just change everything. And it's entrepreneurs are a pretty special breed of people to keep getting up and keep swinging.
Yep, and we thank them for what they do, because they make the world go round. Absolutely. Derek, any final words of advice?
Well, business bankruptcy in Canada is it's there. It happens in different formats, and it's a good structure. It's well worth finding out about if your business is needing some advice.
Terrific. Derek, thanks very much for all this information today on the show.
You're more than welcome.
My guest today, Derek Chase, and you can learn more, or you can schedule that free consultation with Derek at bankruptcytrustebc.ca, bankruptcytrustebc.ca. And that is it for today's Debt Matters podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast from. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. Thanks for listening.